I really think that creating new income sources by utilizing the market mechanism is another way to get the funding into these communities and really reward people for being the land stewards. Because in every community, every neighborhood, there are the old ladies that take care of the flower plot. There are the kids with the community gardens.
That's where the money needs to go.
Yeah, and it needs to go to these people that are, out there on their weekends, volunteering their time, like picking up trash because the city's trash pickup sucks. And they don't want their flower corner like filled with weird wrappers from American candy or whatever floats down the street.
Totally.
And so I think that people really need that funding.
Yo, what is good, ReFi Nation? John Ellison here from ReFi DAO, dropping an episode with Sarah Baxendell from Regen Network. Sarah has not only become a good friend of mine, but is one of the true pioneering leaders in the ReFi space. Her background is vast and extensive, ranging from finance to supply chain management, planning, parks and rec, putting her hands in the soil for over 8 seasons, growing food, designing permaculture landscapes, and now leading the charge at Regen Network as they build an entire stack of technology to allow the environmental asset market to flourish with integrity as temperatures continue to rise and our ecosystems continue to collapse. We look at some of the technical aspects of the system that they've built and also some of the missing pieces of the puzzle where infrastructure could come in and make a massive difference. We hear about some of the amazing milestones that Regen Network has already achieved, as well as a forecast for asset issuance in the year to come. We do touch on the massive gap of women in the blockchain space and how we do need to make some fundamental changes to our culture and our community as we gather, and an invitation to men and women everywhere who are trying to regenerate the earth to really look closely at the role that each of us are playing and how we really do need to lean into doing this together. This was a moving conversation for me. We covered a lot of territory, and I do think you'll enjoy this one. Let us know what you think, and I hope that you have a good time taking on the show. Hey, what's going on, Sarah?
Hey, how's it going, John?
Feels good. Feels good to be here with you. I know you've had an epic tour of Europe, but so appreciate you making the last stop into Lisbon. Before we jump in, be curious to just, get a quick snapshot of what you've been doing in Europe over the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, so I started here with you 6 weeks ago in Lisbon. I just dropped onto the continent, having a ReFi dinner. Yeah, and I went to Paris for ECC and all of the big crypto events of the summer, which was really fun and really energetic. And then I went to Berlin, kind of checked out the state of blockchain in Berlin.
Nice.
And then I went down to Athens and connected with some people who are in sort of the broader tech public goods worldview and experienced what it looks like to build community on decentralized boats across the Greek islands.
Decentralized boats?
Decentralized boatlandia, yes.
Boatland.
Boatlandia. Then just making my way back here to Lisbon, stopping here to do this podcast with you on my way back to the US finally after a full 6-week tour here.
Goodness, I'm sure it feels good to be on your way home. But the decentralized everything meme never seems to have its limits. Decentralizing even boats now. I love it. Well, I'm super excited for this conversation. Obviously, I had a chance to speak with Gregory, and I don't think I really knew quite how badass you were until I met you in person. And then I was just like, oh my gosh, you carry so much and you've done so much already. And it feels like the fire is really burning bright in you amidst this downturn where I think a lot of people are losing some type of confidence in the space. And I'd be curious in our time together to start off a little bit about your background and how you arrived at Regen Network, and then really exfoliate where are we at today with the state of Regen Network, the technology you've built, what it's enabled. And then I think we can kind of take a bit more of a macro lens on the state of impact in the blockchain and really follow some rabbit trails. I know you hold some, really strong opinions, just like Gregory does, that I'd love to give light to. And we'll just see where we go together. Why don't you kick us off? Just quick background and recap of your journey and what brought you to Regen Network and this amazing mission.
Yeah. First, I just want to thank you for what you just said about me. I appreciate it. I think a lot of people don't pause to receive when they're given a compliment. So I just want to receive from you for a second as another way of grounding us into the conversation and just sort of honoring your awareness as well. Yeah. So my name's Sarah. I am the daughter of a corporate CEO. My dad ran Barry USA. True story. No, don't judge. many years ago, about 15 years ago, I was in college, and I remember being in my dorm room, and Hurricane Katrina had just hit New Orleans. The levees had broken. I mean, people were just desperately running around trying to get to safety. And I remember just being shocked at the very core of my being. And really my like relationship to climate weirding started then. And when other people were like, going to party for spring break, I joined the Unitarian Church trip down to do relief in Biloxi, Mississippi.
Real talk, taking action.
Yeah, I didn't know what to do with myself, and I was like, I have to go and help. It was the very first time I ever saw what real climate catastrophe looks like, because there was a 20-foot wall of water that came 5 miles into the land and ripped out everything. I was standing, and it's like ocean, a road, and where there used to be these hotels, these like 10-story high beachfront hotels, and there's literally nothing left of whole hotels except for like 3 cement stairs to nothing. And like stepping up them like 1, 2, 3 and expanding my arms out and being like, oh my God, like there used to be an entire building here that was just ripped out to the sea. And I graduated college. I ended up going and working for the JP Morgan private bank. So I used to manage hedge funds. I used to manage BlackRock.
Yes.
With all my fancy trading licenses, as a good daughter of a corporate CEO does. I was working in fashion and cosmetics planning for Macy's and Estee Lauder in Midtown, and somebody sent me a one-sentence email that was like, hey, Radiohead, the band, is playing in the financial district. You should go check it out. And I just didn't have anything to do that day. And I was like, oh, this is super random.
Radiohead.
Yeah, I was like, okay, cool, free concert, whatever. Like, I was just like, whatever. Epic. It's a Tuesday or something, like totally, nondescript. And I went downtown, and it was definitely not Radiohead.
Was it not?
No, it was the opposite of Radiohead. Yeah, it was a march to the police headquarters for against police brutality. Okay. That was coming from Zuccotti Park, which was the home of Occupy Wall Street. And I just got pulled in. What? Yeah, in a way that I don't know how to describe. It was like there was this big energy. I never had anything like that big energy happen to me as in this community of people. And I was looking around, and I was finding lawyers and teachers and professors and all of these direct action activists on real world policy topics having discussions. And I was like, there's got to be the climate change people here. Yeah. Because I had done a sustainable design and entrepreneurship certificate from the Fashion Institute. So I was already kind of working on closed loop supply chain questions at Macy's and starting their sustainability efforts from a staffer perspective. And I eventually found the weirdos with one piece of cardboard with the earth painted on it. And I remember walking past it and then backing up and being like, this has got to be where they're at. And running in circles until I could find these people to be like, what are you working on? I want to help.
Nice.
Yeah. And so I became one of the organizers of the sustainability working group at Occupy Wall Street. And went through this fantastic process of being, permaculture design trained, really getting into ecological design intervention in New York City, working with community gardens, working in the occupation itself. And there were a ton of different initiatives we did, like bicycle energy bikes and compost systems and gray water systems. And I'm actually writing a chapter in the Green Pill 2.0 book.
Yes.
Of all the things we did in the park and why you need instructions for them should there be an apocalypse in a city. So it's like a prepper's manual at the back a little bit.
Yeah, we need it. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I basically had sort of my second layer of environmental awakening, which really started my design training because I'm a landscape designer by trade. And then Hurricane Sandy.
So Sandy
came into Manhattan with 11 feet of water, pinning down, all of lower Manhattan. Took them over 6 months to pump out all the subways of the water. And myself and people from the Occupy movement that had these like really localized mutual aid networks that we'd built, we literally hopped in canoes and we rowed out to the Rockaways, which are essentially your barrier islands in Queens, and like saved people from the roofs and like brought people water. And, you know, when the water started to recede, it was mass destruction. And we brought out energy bikes, like the bicycle energy bikes with the batteries that you can pedal, so that people had a way to charge their phone to tell their families that they were alive. So my relationship to climate change comes from climate catastrophe.
Yeah.
And sort of the personal experiences of being in those like post-catastrophic environments, which just really like, you can't shake having had that experience. You can't like ever pull that out of your being or ever not do something once you've seen what is, in my opinion, coming and happening already. And then I kind of took a turn away from what I would call sort of like the resistance phase, sort of like raging against the system in a way, and into a design phase. I was very much like, okay, I have these like really fantastic design skills. You know, I want to create solutions was really the direction that I was heading in. And so I spent about 5 years working between sort of New York City, upstate New York, and the Mid-Atlantic, doing everything from designing gardens to creating localized solutions, to helping people form nonprofits, helping people fundraise with state and federal funding. And then I ended up in the city of Pittsburgh, where my family is from. My family's like all 4 grandparents, 7th generation city of Pittsburgh.
Roots.
Yeah, the roots are
It.
super deep in Pittsburgh. Like that house that your
Nice.
grandma lives in there, someone in my family definitely laid the concrete foundation for in like half the city. So I'm from like a really old school Pittsburgh line, but I didn't ever really live there because my dad, we traveled for his job all the time. But I ended up there after my father passed. I just didn't know what else to do. And I became a city park planner.
Yeah.
So I helped to design 10% of the city of Pittsburgh's parks through their sort of revamp master plan, pulling from the open space plan, the climate action plan, and ultimately what became the regional food policy plan. And so it's 1,000 acres of land we redesigned with 25,000 resident participants, which is a lot of humans.
I love it. That is not a small task.
No.
That's a coordination game on another level.
Yes. And so I have
Wow.
I have both from Occupy and the working group spokes council reconciliation model and the general funding process, as well as from just literally working through design processes with like old ladies on their front porch and small children and whoever showed up at the park meeting that day, and municipalities and the state and federal processes and zoning boards and everything else. I have this like real love of the chaos of group design and group decision making and the consensus mechanism. Like I love it.
I can see the themes emerging now.
I know, right? This is how I got. These are the
That's how you
things I
got
bring to
hooked.
blockchain.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I totally got hooked early.
Yeah.
And then my biggest project there was a place called Hilltop Urban Farm. It's the reclamation of 107 acres that used to be public, like federal housing complex land.
Okay.
It essentially was what they used to call the projects, which is a socially inappropriate term for the record.
For the record.
For the record. But just so people understand what I mean by the bigger term. They'd taken it down. It had been just like fenced in for 30 years. No one had touched it. Just vacant infrastructure, wasteland, streets, stuff growing in streets, sidewalks still there, old legacy trees. And the mayor at the time, Peduto, was very interested in exploring like what could it become in its federal land. So I led a design process for there to be a conservation community, like housing built there that's mixed income, as well as the nation's largest urban farm, which has an adult farmer training program for people to start real businesses growing food in the city. It has a production orchard, which involves some partnerships with local distilleries for native cider apples, which is one of my favorite things.
As you would,
As you would, you know, local brew, Pittsburgh style.
Yes, come on.
And then it has a youth orchard, a children's farm, a community garden, and an immigrant farming area for Cambodian immigrants. So there's a lot of like layers to that particular project on an agriculture and infrastructure level. But when I had gone to upstate New York after New York City, I had farmed. I've done 8 seasons of like full scale agricultural production, systems management. 8 seasons. And amongst all the rest of my life, I have a really big plant problem and food growing problem. I totally do.
Very green fingers.
Yeah, I try to. But yeah, so there's a whole infrastructure development process there that happened over 5-6 years. Including land trusts that are preserving hillsides and just a ton of development. So I've restored municipal scale landscapes through their design processes and their construction management processes and their funding processes with state, local, and federal and philanthropy funding before I came to Regen. And so that's where Christian, who was one of the co-founders alongside Gregory of Regen Network, found me, was in Pittsburgh.
He found you. Okay.
Yeah, it's like a funny, like, local fate connection insofar as they used to run a company called Terragenesis International. And one of the gentlemen on their team, Russell, his older brother was friends with my older brother because we went to the same high school in Amherst, Massachusetts. And they were like, you got to meet these people. They're like permaculture people. And I almost didn't go to the bar that night. I was like so exhausted from like a public planning meeting or something. And I was like, I can meet them at the bar. And I just told them about what I did and they told me about what they did. And Christian was gracious enough to like literally call me every 6 months for years.
Really?
Like, yeah, for like 4 or 5 years, he would literally call me every 6 months and be like, what do you do? He knew. I love him for this. I have such gratitude.
Yes.
Because it opened up so much possibility for me. And then when I had finally left, all of my public planning processes, my life had just shifted. I'd, passed on the organizations to their current stewards, actually, who are still there. I just sent him a 1-sentence email and was like, I'm not doing that thing anymore. What are you doing? And he calls me like 10 minutes later.
Right away. Been waiting for this moment.
Yeah, he was like, I don't know what you're going to do yet, but we're going to have you do some things.
Okay.
And then I started with Regen in early October of 2019 and been there ever since. Yeah.
And what was the kernel of the mission that really captivated you out of all the things that you could have done after that, career of so many different milestones? What really caught your heart about what Regen Network is doing?
Yeah, I think for me as a designer, being really like a landscape restoration designer, and my background's everything from like food and ag to stormwater to forestry restoration, all in urban context. I looked at what I was able to do in 6-7 years in a city system. Yeah. Like a very supported, very proactive, very planning oriented, very consensus oriented city system. And I did the math. I was like, okay, if I'm, at the time I was, 32 maybe or something, 33. I just did the math. I was like, if I do a city every 5 years, I might get through however many, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cities. And you as a planner, you only get one section of the city. So you may get 10% of a city's public space. Yeah. I just multiplied the acres and I was like, okay, cool. So maybe I get 20,000 acres of impact in a lifetime. Yeah. That's not bad.
I was going to say.
I mean, I'm not
Especially if it's that deep, because you went really deep in those projects. But yeah, the scale of it wasn't, satisfying you.
Yeah, it didn't satisfy the problem scale. And when I heard that they were building this platform that would empower, thousands of people like me, or people in processes like I had been, or communities on the ground, like I had just spent, the last basic decade before joining Regen working with communities on the ground, trying to design their projects, trying to fund them, try to implement them. I just thought from a scale perspective that the smartest thing that I could contribute to is creating systems and tools that when the tool set and the system was there, thousands of people could use it and would really activate a decentralized autonomous climate action unit.
There we go.
All across the globe of weirdos like me that want to do something and don't necessarily have the way to quantify it or plan it or fund it. So I thought that if you want to do something extraordinary, you have to do it at a global scale. and the scale at which they were proposing the impact would be from this series of tools really appealed to me, having worked on like a regional and local scale.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, all the different kind of building blocks of your story, both working in hedge funds and finance, and also supply chain, sustainability, but actually showing up amidst these crises to really put your hands to the work of responding to Mother Nature, upheaving and changing our landscapes, and really having a multi-generational approach to the depth of these problems. And I think having built software for local governments back at OpenGov, managing those numbers of different constituents around local issues is no small task.
No.
And I love how you brought in kind of this notion of consensus, and how, really the whole planet is kind of arriving at a new consensus around what actually matters for human and for planetary health. And so I'd be curious, with that as a framing, how would you describe the work that Regen Network is doing right now for people who have no idea about the system that you've built?
Ultimately, I think Regen Network is trying to stand up a platform with a series of modular tools that anyone can use, which allows any community to be a designer of a restoration project and for them to communicate what their project is and its outcomes in a way that it's both scientifically sound and like an average grandma can understand it.
It's a nice balance.
Yeah, it's an important balance to be able to like explain to the old lady at the community meeting like why we're planting trees. Like they get it, but they need some help to really get it. And then also beyond that, be able to govern that. Be able to say, we're a nonprofit in this city. We are redesigning this place. We're restoring this place. We're doing all of these plantings with our community. We already have our own governance of the process and of our organization and of the community's relationship to it. Let's like package that into a asset standard and then allow us to reflect that already existing governance mechanism into the governance of that standard, and really allowing for the decentralization of local impact decision making, and really making sure that that's in the hands of communities.
Yes, totally.
And I'm sort of a self-prescribed like decentralization maxi who believes that there's a role for centralization. But you have to be careful that it doesn't become like the central misplanning department.
Central misplanning department.
Which is how I dub poorly planned central mechanisms after my experience last week in Greece. But I think that a lot of the funding paradigm for regenerative work is very limited. It's limited in the United States, it's limited by state and federal funding, which has a long governmental reconciliation process. We have the IRA bill, we have the Farm Bill, we have state and local budgets, we have the state ag departments, federal ag departments, NRCS. I mean, you go on and on about who decides those things. And then it's small groups of people deciding what the programmatic paradigm is for the United States, at least. And that comes down to neighborhoods with budgets. And then you have philanthropy partners. So it's life in America is a public-private partnership, whether people want to admit that or not.
True. Yeah.
It's very much at the heart of our culture. And so you're limited also by the scale of philanthropy endowments and the state of the market.
Yeah.
When the market goes up in the stock market, so do the endowments, and they can give away more.
Yeah.
When it goes down, it goes down.
Exactly, yeah.
And you watch these, local nonprofit ecosystems expand and contract. And so from my perspective, creating, and this really comes from my, 15 years of experience of actually helping people fund these projects. Because you got to have the money to
financing.
Get the trees and put them in the ground. As a simple example. I really think that creating new income sources by utilizing the market mechanism is another way to get the funding into these communities and really reward people for being the land stewards. Because in every community, every neighborhood, like there are the old ladies that take care of the flower plots. Like there are the kids with the community gardens.
That's where the money needs to go.
Yeah, and it needs to go to these people that are, out there on their weekends, volunteering their time, like picking up trash because the city's trash pickup sucks and they don't want their flower corner like filled with weird wrappers from American Candy or whatever floats down the street.
Totally.
And so I think that people really need that funding, and we have a complex tool system which I can explain that serves that. But ultimately, from my perspective, it's about moving capital into the hands of those who restore ecology. And at Regen Network, it's short for the Regeneration Network.
Yes.
We're all regeneration nerds for sure. But our mission is to restore ecology. And not for us to restore it, for the people to restore it on their own terms. And
totally.
For ecosystem function to be preserved and restored, because from an ecological perspective, the climate was a self-regulating system, which had evolved to a place of perfect execution and design through many years of its own iterative design process throughout millennia. And we sort of just did some things that weren't super great and destabilized it as we, evolved our culture and as our species expanded. And you can argue that maybe we're the invasive species, or maybe we're the Keystone species, as Gregory might say, which is more hopeful than the invasive species.
This is the opportunity, totally. Yeah. But that's how we're showing up on the earth. Yeah, I think that kind of industrial revolution and the increasing in complexity in human culture on the face of the earth over a pretty small timescale, considering, both humanity's history and Earth's history, has had such a surprisingly devastating impact on this stable biosphere. And yet it also demonstrates the power of these coordination tools to make change. And when we can introduce systems with new incentives and new mechanism design and really reduce the barriers to entry, it's definitely my hypothesis that we can realize that potential of a keystone species where we're really contributing to biodiversity and to stability on this planet. And I think what's interesting about Regen Network in particular is knowing the origin story of who you all are really came from this in the background of actually how does it actually work to implement these projects on the ground and do this with really strong community engagement and consensus alongside academic rigor and secure technology. And I think a lot of the ReFi space today definitely suffers from, an overemphasis on technology and a lack of connection to the people and the places on the ground where this is actually happening.
Yeah.
And so I would love to get to that point to really talk about some of the specific projects that have been financed through Regen Network. But first, it'd be really nice to just get a kind of architecture overview of the entire stack that you guys have built. I know there's a lot of different components. So maybe if you can sketch me out as a landscape designer, that 10,000 foot concept map. Let's look at the different parts and then we can go in and build some fidelity into each of the areas. Learn what this enables and just look at the system you guys have built because it's vast. So how does that sound? Should we start from there?
Yeah, that's perfect. I think we should treat it like it's a master plan.
Let's
just
do the master
plan.
plan. Let's go.
Plan.
Come on, yeah.
Yeah, so our stack is first and foremost built on the Tendermint consensus, which is sort of base layer one of the Cosmos ecosystems functionality.
Okay.
And then on top of Tendermint consensus is the Cosmos SDK. So ultimately that stuff has to do with basic functionalities like how do you establish consensus, state machine, transfer, staking, module. There's a number of core blockchain functionalities that just have to exist for chains to exist.
Sure.
We chose to house ourselves in the Cosmos ecosystem because at the time it was sort of Ethereum was emergent and didn't necessarily have the level of application or community that it did today. And ultimately, we felt that the network we wanted to build needed to be self-sovereign.
Yep.
Insofar as the people that are the users of the network should be able to govern the state machine.
Totally.
And you don't have that on Ethereum. You're just sort of application layering. You can kind of gov in on your application layer, but you don't really get to have a big hand in Ethereum consensus mechanism decision making. Yeah, it's just too vast and used by too many people. It's too generic.
Totally.
And ours is custom built for the global carbon accounting and ecological data use case.
Yep.
So, it needed to be application specific, and the Cosmos ecosystem is designed for application specific blockchain that can be autonomous. So on top of our infrastructure layer is really, the way I think about it is it's a public database with a set of core functionality.
Okay.
How do you create a credit? Who administers the credit?
Is this how you describe Regen Ledger?
Regen Ledger, because the eco credit module and the basket functionality does a certain set of things. You can design an asset, you can govern your asset, you can issue credits off your asset, you can register a project against that standard, you can issue a credit batch to a specific project, and you can anchor data on chain. So it's really actually quite simple, the set of functionality, but it's very core architecturally to what the use cases are that derive from that. And then the application layer has what I consider to be kind of a dual application. One is fully formed in a sort of 2.0 edition, which is Regen Marketplace.
Yeah.
The other one is emerging right now, which is sort of
Nice.
the origination software stack for Regen Registry
Cool.
to actually create credits from scratch and
Very
go through the
nice.
scientific process. So our marketplace is basically when credits have been issued, whoever holds them can make a project page, they can list them, they can trade them, they can transfer them, and they can retire them for corporate accounting claims, which is very standard marketplace functionality. You can also, through the app, dig into the credit standards. You can see all the project documentation, all of the things that you need to see to be able to understand what asset are you selling and what asset are you buying, all emerges on Regen Marketplace. Whereas, our stack, there's a lot of marketplaces now for climate assets on the blockchain. Our stack, that's really just sort of the end point of our stack. It actually starts with Regen Registry, which is a series of scientific tools that allow for communities of practice to design their own scientific methodology. So there's forestry methodologies and tree planting methodologies and ocean restoration methodologies and soil carbon methodologies and biochar methodologies and biodiversity methodologies. And there's over 40 of them under development right now.
Amazing.
But basically, scientists, actual climate scientists, and real nonprofits and projects on the ground design a project, develop the climate science for it, goes through public comment, goes through peer review, comes out as this institutional asset, and then projects can have credits issued off of them. But to make it even more complex, this whole system, if you take Regen Registry and set it aside as our unique version of a decentralized registry program, any registry on the planet can use our software to issue and govern their programs. So Vera can use it, Gold Standard can use it, Plan Vivo can use it. Anyone can use it. It's a public goods infrastructure at its core. And Regen Registry is our community's unique response to the state of the carbon, biodiversity, water, et cetera, asset market, the natural capital asset market, which is uniquely designed based on the principles that we believe in, but is ultimately used by a very specific series of communities and projects on the ground to restore real-world projects. So there are 15 million hectares under restoration via the platform tools, which is a lot of land.
That's a lot more than the 20K you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, that's my whole point here, John, is that you need systems to get to scale.
15 million. Amazing. Million. Love that snapshot. Yeah. What else? Okay. And
there's 2 million credits, carbon and biodiversity, mostly carbon removals being issued by the end of the year, that are, from these new scientific standards.
That's amazing. Yeah, you guys are crushing it. I love this story. It's such a good example.
It's crazy how many projects
this is scaling up. This is amazing.
Yeah, and people don't even realize it. I think in part because we need a slightly better website that explains the pipeline.
You're only building a few things.
We're only building 400 things at once for everyone.
But I love
it's really amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so what else? Give me some more snapshots. I'm loving these.
Yeah, I mean, we think we're probably going to have 25 million credits next year. It sort of it goes on exponential curve from here, because once these projects all do a single pilot and that pilot's sold, then they scale.
The market demand is there. Everything is coming on chain. You have liquidity available. Price discovery is enabled. That's such a cool system. Okay. All right. So 25 million for next year.
25 million for next year. And then on top of this, if we step out into the Interchain paradigm, you can use the basket functionality of the eco credit module to make fungible credits, because credit batches are semi-fungible at the project vintage year level. So you can make pools of credits that anything that's issued on Regen, you can design a basket standard, take it through governance, and then it becomes what's called IBC enabled, which is the inter-blockchain communication. So this is sort of back to the Cosmos layer. So every chain in the Cosmos is connected via IBC and a number of other security mechanisms. But basically, it's a bridgeless world where the underlying SDK infrastructure allows for all the chains to talk to each other and work together like a family unit. So it's more like a web where every chain is a node and they can all talk to each other. So we have a carbon pool in the Osmosis Exchange that's IBC compatible, so that people can program liquid carbon into their applications in the Cosmos ecosystem. And that comes from a bridge that we built with the Toucan protocol from Polygon to Regen Network so that we could get the nature carbon 10 asset into our registry. The Toucan governs that standard on our registry.
Okay,
so it's another sort of third-party program using our tools.
But it is actually standard on your registry. That's the key piece of it. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, right. It mirrors the standard that they have from the bridging protocol.
Of course, but it's defined on your registry. Okay.
It is defined on our registry, and it's canceled out of theirs and issued into ours when it comes one way, sort of both ways across the bridge. So there is now a broader, what I would call a broader interchain carbon paradigm because of this bridge. And it's really, I think the future of what we have to do as an industry, and I know we're going to get to this later, is really like talking about the missing infrastructure that allows all the credits to all work together.
Yeah, totally.
Rather than being sort of like tribalized, which is a lot of where we're at in the whole blockchain paradigm is we're in sort of a tribalism wave. And part of my theory of the future is that we're moving into a federation wave.
A federation wave. Okay. Yeah, I'd be curious to get your take on both your guys' positioning and the broader market as a whole. Because I know that, you guys were laying these foundations long before there was a hype cycle. And then suddenly, like, ReFi became a meme. I think it was probably Gregory that said the word ReFi. Maybe it was Raph. I don't know. But, like, suddenly it's like, hey, ReFi is a thing. And there's money flowing into the system. And, like, hey, it's now cool and exciting. And yet you seem to have a really clear set of principles that you're using to build a much larger system over a long period of time. So, give us your take on your position, the broader system as a whole, and push and pull against whatever you think is not working, like whatever needs to change. Like, I'd love to just kind of go a little bit more macro on the broader impact blockchain ecosystem.
Yeah. So first, ReFi is short for regenerative finance, which largely roots from the work of Carol Sanford around regenerative business. And it's a very specific training that we are longstanding members of that community. And outside of blockchain, there's regen pollination, there's all of these regeneration networks, and regeneration as a design is a design science that's used both in business, finance, and ecology. So blockchain sort of woke up to something that was already deeply entrenched across the broader like design and ecological impact space at a global scale. And so maybe Gregory is probably, just linear-wise, probably the first person to call it ReFi.
Makes sense. Yeah, makes sense.
Because he's been longstandingly trained by Carol Sanford, as is our whole leadership team. And she's a fantastic human. And, so I think that there was this massive pop in the marketplace of everybody kind of rushing in to, you can do climate impact with blockchain, and largely with very narrow thesis, like it's transparent. It's like the same, you took the basic blockchain thesis, like you can see everything. Wow, you can't hide anything.
Tokenizing solves all the things.
Yeah, so just liquid. It's
liquidity is the best.
Liquid, just lots and lots of water.
Don't worry about what it is.
Yeah, totally. Just liquefy that. And I think that happened, and some fantastic ecosystems arose, some really great applications emerged.
I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah, and I think out of it was an interesting time period at Regen, because we were like, wait a minute, we already do this, you guys.
But like in a deeper way,
But like in a deeper way, we're asking harder. I think we ask harder questions than other people.
You've had more time to ask those questions.
Yeah, and we're just like extreme nerds. And so we're the hardest ones on ourselves. If other people think that like their environments are, hard to build consensus in, it takes us a long time we try to make the right decision. And so it really takes a long time to do it as a team. It's an enormous process to decide anything in the world of Regen Network. But our goal was never to use blockchain for blockchain's sake. It was just the most intelligent answer to how are we going to financialize these ecological outcomes of these real world projects and really create catalytic change. And so we focus most uniquely. We have this universal registry system, this sort of marketplace software stack. Anybody can use our neutral software stack. Right now, the only boundary is it has to relate to ecology. Which you could go through our governance and work through a process to expand that limiting paradigm. But we're ecology nerds, so we're right now still sticking in our ecology corner.
Yeah, you should do.
But really, our system is designed to let people design assets for themselves, to create projects on a project developer level, to have autonomy over methodology development and climate science. So we're really focused on the origination side of the paradigm there are tons of partners that are going to make, cool middleware and retirement aggregators and pools and all the things that are absolutely the market side accompaniment to any asset.
Sure.
But we think the assets need to be better than they are.
Well, and so does the demand side of the market. I think largely that's what we're seeing is there's a lack of trust in the financial instruments themselves and the ability to adapt them over time and to improve these standards and do it in a way that actually reflects the needs of these communities. So I think that take is super sound and been validated. And it sounds like, that's unfolding a level of trust in your ecosystem that's allowing it to flourish and to grow. And so, it sounds doubling down on that is making a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's been interesting, in this, I would say sort of like the second wave of, things to be at least reactionary about sort of like the critique of air with the Guardian article and sort of like, are the standards real standards? And, that wave of inquiry that happened earlier this year.
Yeah.
And it made us really sit down and go, who are we really? And what do we believe in? Because we have Nature Carbon 10, which isn't our standard.
Yeah, of course.
Even though I definitely wrote it with Rob in the group at the time. Asking ourselves really like, what is our niche and what are we ultimately trying to accomplish? And it's really comes down to, believing that communities should have the rights to autonomously govern, believing that there needs to be a demand side power vector in the market, because a lot of the standards and the processes in the carbon market are driven by the big companies. It's driven by the supply side. And then at the end of the day, that it's just making different assets didn't matter if the data provenance wasn't better, if the methodologies weren't more emergent climate science, if they weren't more localized, if they weren't customized. But that's up against kind of a little bit of the paradigm shift of where our ecosystem is going to be going next, which is going to be like expanding into more how do we use these tools. But our registry community, which is one of the many, sort of like, I call them the autonomous sub-DAO zones.
Nice.
In my head, at least, where I'm like, all the climate science nerds are over on the registry squad. And,
totally.
There's some registry people on our core team. And then this big community of project developers and scientists that are using those tools. And you see groups like ERA Brazil and Moss, which are longstanding Red Plus credit developers, frankly, bailing out of Vera because they have the tools to build their own methodology and govern their own programs and have their own terms with their communities of practice on the ground. And you're really starting to see some really innovative climate science emerge, some incredibly high quality projects, having the freedom to design and govern their assets and their go-to-market strategies for themselves rather than sort of square peg, round hole, forcing programs onto communities that don't really want all of that, but they need the money for the projects. And so they're kind of constantly in this struggle of, how can they be the directors of their paradigm, the designers of their systems, as well as, participate in the broader global market.
And it seems like there is almost like a continuation of the fragmentation in the market as a result of a lack of trust in some of these existing institutions. Whereas you guys are trying to ensure the integrity of these assets at the moment of issuance by really working on the model for methodology creation. But what else is missing in this stack? Like, what do you think are the core components, infrastructure-wise or otherwise, that can really enable the growth of this market with integrity to meet the needs of the demand side, which is ultimately what you're describing, you're trying to respond to. So what are the missing pieces that you see?
Yeah, I think from a software perspective, us having the full stack origination software stack complete, which really is like the toolkit that the project developers need to do that work more efficiently. And it's documentation, it's data attestation, it's, provenance on chain, it's just process improvement. Really, it's going to make their experience in the program a lot better. That's different. And I would say that's sort of what the corporate market side wants is more data attestation through the supply chain mechanism. Like every step needs to have a decentralized identifier. Every step needs to have a data signature. You need to improve sort of the data processes of the claim and be able to have access to all of the data in a way where it's machine readable. And there's a ton of layers of why that perspective is going to create higher quality assets. Even if the methodologies were the same, that data provenance would make them higher quality assets in my professional opinion. But I think that there's, that is a very different thing, because the Regen Registry is one programmatic component that ultimately is a unique program designed first and foremost by the core team of Regen and currently governed by the token holders. But it's one project of the network that uses these tools. So if you step back out to network perspective of what does the network need?
Interesting.
That's very different, and that's more Web3. I'm of the opinion that Regen Registry has its place. It's for super institutional buyers. It's for high quality climate science. It's got its place in the market. But it's not the only way to go to market.
Sure.
From the perspective of Hilltop Urban Farm that I ran in Pittsburgh, it is too expensive and too cumbersome, and no funder will fund it. I asked. So I tested this. I was like, can we? And they were like, nope, that's not a priority for us. They don't want to go through the methodology development process.
Of course.
And they already did, they do these projects. They collect grant data. They have photos. These orchard trees are still there. They're producing fruit. They weigh the fruit. You know what I mean? There's data. I think that for the network to truly expand and serve all ecological use cases and scales appropriately, we need to allow the registry to be the registry, which is very much what the core team is focused on and will be until sort of it's really anchored itself in the marketplace. But the network at large, I think we currently have a discussion in governance about permissionless credit class.
Yeah, I love this concept.
Yeah, and really the original concept was not that there would be a gating system.
Of course, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere and establish some form of like order and safety.
Yeah, and ensure integrity.
Totally. And now I think we're at a point where the future of the registry is becoming clearer, including its governance, and it's sort of becoming an autonomous thing within the network itself.
Nice.
Which is a fantastic maturation point. But I am actually personally more excited about adopting permissionless credit class functionality. It's on testnet. It's been there for a year.
Oh, actually, okay.
When we set up credit classes for the registry or for anything that goes on chain, we put it on testnet first.
Sure.
And so this is just giving people the tools that the core team uses
that
you can use on testnet. And ultimately what that will allow is for communities to not have to go through a registry. So Hilltop Urban Farm isn't going through a Regen Registry. It doesn't have the money. It doesn't have the time. It has 3 staff members. It's not going to work for them. But the funders are like, yes, let's create assets. We have all this data. And like, I literally have like the thickest hard drive you've ever seen of like all the soil samples. And, you know, all the professors that picked out climate appropriate rootstock and, you know, every material I ever put in the ground and exactly where every tree is and Sol.js located. Like I've got data for days on that project. But writing a methodology isn't going to work for that use case. And permissionless credit class allows communities to design their credit standard, issued on chain, establish their governance and issuer just like you normally would do, and then register their own projects against it, and then issue credit batches for themselves. So it powerful. Hands the tools to the people at a localized scale.
So powerful.
That I think you can't have global climate impact unless you give the people the tools.
Sure.
And if you want to go through Regen Registry, or I later for Hilltop Urban Farm want to write my methodology and go through public comment and peer review, and maybe the professors at Penn State University will do that one day with their grad students, and like, hell yeah, if they want to. But
they need a place to start.
They need a place to start. And they need funding now. And we can't just have like perfect get in the way of get her done. And I have been on team get her done the whole time.
You gotta be.
So
it's a climate game. Time's running out.
Yeah, time's running out. And so I am super pumped about the potential of that governance discussion. And probably by the time this comes out, maybe we'll find out what the result is. Hopefully the people have voted yes.
They're up for it, for sure.
Looking back, I hope that this is a victory, because I'm waiting to like do all these things I've been waiting to do for years. Same with Dave Forson from Low Labs. We're like, we have all these communities of doing real impact and like, we can't use the registry. We're not that audience. We need our own tools. And so it just unlocks so many things and so many reasons that I joined Regen Network. And then separate from that, at a network-wide level, we're about to have a governance proposal, and this is a little bit technical, for I know, this is alpha. It's not on governance yet, so we'll see what the timing of this
It'll
is.
Be fine. It'll be fine.
Yeah, a friend of mine.
Alpha,
alpha. These are secret alphas that may not be alpha by the time it comes out, but a friend of mine who's a really wonderful public goods and DAO human is putting up a governance proposal for CosmWasm, which is a smart contracting language. So our architecture is Golang. Golang is heavy.
Okay.
Heavy infrastructure. Heavy.
I like the way you say it.
Heavy, in my opinion.
That's very
heavy. It's hard. And so CosmWasm is sort of like the Cosmos version of a Solidity. It's quick. It's dirty.
Yeah.
It can be secure. It's permissioned if you design it and adopt it that way. So like the community has to agree that they want your application and it fits the use case or whatever. But it would let people like me that want to build other products on the stack start getting down.
Nice.
In a way that they really can't right now.
Okay.
It's just too hard.
It's too cumbersome.
It's too cumbersome.
Inputs are too high.
Yeah, it's just too burdensome.
Oh,
the maintenance is too burdensome. And this is my personal opinion. Engineers will disagree with this section of the programming. But I'm a CosmWasm advocate because there are communities of software developers. Some have been on our team, and some are built other climate stacks with the USDA and open team that we participated in. Some are just people like me that know our stack really well and have like developer friends and are like, I can build an app for that. I have a list of like 14 apps that should be built off the core stack.
It sounds like a project for you.
Yeah. So I think that opening up CosmWasm allows for like an app developer ecosystem to emerge on that core stack.
I'm super excited to see.
Yeah, me too. I feel like people have been building other places because they didn't know where to build. And, it's part that we need that language on our core chain. And then it's part that we need to find a way for our core chain to talk to Hedera and Celo and Polygon and Solana and Ripple and a main chain Ethereum in a meaningful way where these applications are part on our network and part through IBC and part through potential partners like Evmos and Ethereum virtual machines. We need to be able to build a way in which all of our stacks become a super stack.
Yes.
And talk to each other. And it's not like, how do I get my credits from here to there? How does my thing work with that? Because there's a lot of like people wanting to do stuff with us and stuff and wanting to do stuff across the entire climate, impact ecosystem where it's just like a bunch of technical hurdles.
Yes. And I guess this really is the bull case for Regen Network and why you guys have chosen this architecture. Because if you can really hold, the asset origination workflow with the highest integrity, meaning maintaining, the needs from the large scale institutions to the small projects, but then create the software that can allow these assets that originated in Regen Ledger to go to wherever they need to go and to whatever applications are demanding them. This could become an incredibly powerful system that scales at such a vast pace. As we know, these cycles, when they scale up quickly. And there's, oftentimes rational exuberance that goes with these swings. And so I think that seems to be a really 1-2 punch, the permissionless credit class module alongside CosmWasm. And I've always looked at Regen Network and just wondered why are you guys taking on so much?
I know.
It's such a big part of the entire environmental asset market that you're taking on. But now it seems to me I have a better understanding of why you've chosen to lay these foundations first, knowing the thesis okay, this has to allow a developer ecosystem to come on top.
Yeah.
But you really needed the marketplace to be in place to prove out the initial demand, to then signal to all of these developers, hey, there's an entire ecosystem of innovation waiting to be built here. And look at the different portals and the different communities that we can bridge to with this set of infrastructure. So I'm super glad we've gone into this. And yeah, I think I'm curious if there's anything else network level or infrastructure wise that's coming to view for you to really take this system to the next level, because it feels like you guys are building critical mass here.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way. I would say any other ecosystem in the bear market, tokenomics and just general investment are limiting factors.
Sure.
And there's climate impact applications on many different chains. And so one, I think I think for Regen Network, our 3 posts of evolution, I'll give it 4 posts of evolution. We talked about permissionless credit class. We talked about cosmosm and developer ecosystem. I think that DAOfication of the core network, like marketing DAO, tokenomics DAO.
Yeah, nice.
Like core DAO of network management away from the core team is actually like mission critical.
Super important.
And I'm super pumped about that. And then we're starting a public process for a tokenomics revamp because we're the second chain in the Cosmos ecosystem. Like,
wow.
These are 2017 white papers. This is 2021 network launches. These are
OGs.
OGs, and they're finally not in a good way. It's like tokenomics that like you can't even dust off the tokenomics anymore. You gotta like give her a facelift. Like straight up. She's old. She's old. She's stable, but she's old. And there's so many more tools and so much more expansive thinking regarding tokenomics. And we now have a real economy. I mean, there are proposed fees for marketplace, proposed fees for registry. There are proposed fee for Ledger API for developers to use it.
Sure.
There's a lot of real economic activity that happens on Regen Network that needs to all come on chain so you can see it. Because some of it's still like OTC behind the scenes because you have nonprofits and whatever. So you got to bring the entire economy onto chain. You got to be very clear about what the economics of the economy are. And then you need to build into the tokenomic model because you really need to lift the value of tokens everywhere because, that's how you fund an ecosystem is from there being value seen in the token. And I mean, what makes what we do really hard, everybody else has like one simple, tiny little piece of the climate impact sort of app world. They're mostly just apps. Ain't nobody playing infrastructure but us.
Yeah.
We'd be the only infrastructure, only true infrastructure in town. And it's heavy. It's heavy to stand up infrastructure and then dual application layer. And it's hard to communicate, at a climate impact level, why our stack has value. And, there are missing mechanisms to relate the value of the credits. So like economic wise, the 2 million credits are worth about $21 million. The credits that are, supposed to be on chain next year, you add a couple zeros to that. And you look at the Regen token price. And not that these things are directly correlated. It's a governance token of software upgrades, just to be clear to the regulators. It is a governance token of software upgrades. But the value of the economic impact of the ecosystem is so rapidly growing that you have to start asking questions about like, how do you have a conversation about the value of the ecosystem?
Yeah.
And the actors within it who are all autonomously using tools and autonomously governing them, 20,000 wall holders deep. That's a lot of co-creators that are co-building a system together. And you start to give them more autonomy over that system with permissionless credit class and with cosmosm and more participatory models with DAO governance. And then the tokenomics start to kind of weave all of the potential together. I mean, it could become just the most ecstatic expression of, in my opinion, ecology.
Yes.
Because you're finally talking about an ecosystem where the resources go, carbon dioxide into tree, oxygen out, all the water up from the ground, mycelial network under the ground, more tree friends. I mean, you start to actually like see an ecosystem emerge and you can feel it being ecological in the like analogy that you choose to use. And you can also see it being this like fantastic community of creators that, you don't have to build on our ecosystem if we can connect our ecosystem elsewhere, but you should be able to do what you want in our ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Shouldn't have to be asking nobody permission. And in my opinion, to restore ecology or do a local project or build a dope dApp, like let the people do the people's thing. There's enough there for them to work with that if they believe in the North Star and the mission, like we should find a way to empower them and give them the tooling that they need. Because for me, that's the work I want to do next. I spent 4 years staying the stack up. I'm almost tired of infrastructure. I'm almost tired. I didn't even code anything. I just helped everything stand.
Totally.
And I really am excited about the weird and the wonderful that comes next when you start doing a lot of little things. Because a lot of little things add up. I actually think a lot faster than building big things.
Totally. And there's so much surface area that's emerging for contributions. And I think, looking back here, Occupy Wall Street movement, there is this enormous amount of built up potential energy in the space of
Totally.
young people of all sorts of different colors and textures and expressions that are just really searching for a place to belong and to contribute. And I think it's interesting also kind of extending the ecology metaphor, throughout history, stewards of nature have often been women.
Mm-hmm.
And, throughout very tragic historical period, men effectively removed women from positions of power systematically.
Yeah.
And I think much of our industrial age really reflects this kind of hyper-masculine dominance, scientific reductionist, emotional disconnection, oftentimes a hurt ego searching for validation through the external world. And there's this system mismatch in terms of what I hear, needs to happen on the ground, oftentimes being led by women who are really stewards of nature and community and food and the time together, and this ecosystem of technology that's often led by men.
Yeah.
And there's a really big, cacophony, this dissonance in this space. And I'm curious how you found it. Like, you're obviously an incredibly strong leader in the space, but you often stand in a room full of dudes with, raging testosterone, radically different views. And I'm curious to get your take on, like, where are we now and what can we do to make this movement that we're building together more representative of nature, more holistic in the way that we express ourselves?
Yeah, this is a complex topic to unpack, which I have some emergent and I guess controversial opinions of. And I appreciate you taking the conversation here. I think it's really important and really timely. I have found in the blockchain world that there are a lot more women in the climate and public good space.
Okay.
And it's a lot more welcoming to women. But I was just in Paris at Funding the Commons, ECC, ReFi Day at Cello, Nebular Summit, Modular Summit, OsmoCon. I mean, everything that was like Ethereum-based, climate-based, public goods-based, and Cosmos-based. So a little bit of literally everybody, except for the Bitcoin maxis. And they're always creeping in the shadows, still
creeping in the shadows.
Just still trying to, yell about their digital gold. Long may those miners reign. And I came to blockchain via men. I had like a series of just like nerd friends in Pittsburgh with mining rigs in like 2014. And I was like, you guys are so weird. And then I eventually was like, oh, wow. So, I have a lot of love for a lot of men across the community. And I have had a lot of really fantastic support in Regen Network. And really in the whole climate impact space, like people really they get it and they get me. But I'm one of the many co-presidents, as I lovingly call it, of the Cosmos Ladies Cartel.
Okay. Didn't even know this is such a thing.
Yeah, they have the Tendermint Mafia.
Okay.
And we now have the Cosmos Ladies Cartel.
There we go. Okay. Where is this going?
Yeah. So it's a Telegram group, basically, of almost 200 women. And we did a women only event, which was fantastic. I went to also the ReFi Summit in the ECC swirl, which was so many women from so many different ecosystems, and really 3 guys in the room, and they looked like somebody's boyfriend, and I was like, this is the only time that I've ever said I think that that's someone's boyfriend sitting there and just got dragged along. Or there were some curious men as well that were just like, this is great programming, and showed up, and we're like, wow, there's a lot of women here.
This is unusual.
Totally unusual.
At a crypto conference.
Sure. Yeah, you have that contrasting against there are some Telegram groups at these conferences where people put up videos of the events, so you can see whether you're like, do I want to go to that or not? Yeah. And it's just like a pile of sweaty men with backpacks on dancing.
Yep.
Not a woman in sight. And you're like, okay, next party. And you're looking, you're like, no women. You literally see no women anywhere. Sure. And, the more and more that I start to do organizing with other women in the blockchain space, and a lot of it is through the Cosmos Ladies Cartel, because that's kind of our home. But, I've been sort of softly doing it in ReFi as well, ever since sort of, Rick St. John and, folks' first ReFi Summit. And for the last 15 years, I've been a huge women advocate, done everything from women's circles to, I always have 2 to 3 people I'm mentoring at any point in time.
Nice. Yeah.
I try to take really good care of the women on my team. But I had some shocking experiences, some that are personal and some that were just stories from women in the industry that really make me pause. Everything from, like, why are there no women on the stage? Like an entire ECC climate morning on whatever room that was, and not a single presentation by a woman. And they're all, other than Marcus from ClimateDAOs, awful presentations, in my opinion. That was incredibly poor programming, and by someone who didn't even understand the industry or who to call, And then there were other events where there was like panels, and there's been women in these ecosystems, not just for 1 or 2 years now, but 5 years, 7 years. Like, we were there.
Yeah, of course.
When y'all started. Yeah. All y'all. And you can't even put one woman on stage. They're not even thinking about it. They're not even like, maybe we should call any woman. Just like any woman. Literally any woman. Maybe we should call a woman and ask her if she knows a woman that could maybe participate here. And a lot of it was so unconscious. And so it's like keynotes, it's panels. And we worked through, I will give a shout out to Aaron from OsmoCon. We definitely had some conversations on the side leading up to that event where we were like, hey, there needs to be more women involvement. And he sort of empowered us over the demo stage. And so a number of women were able to come and give like product and technical presentations as the leads of their ecosystem, which was super cool to see women giving the technical presentations in particular. So there were some really beautiful moments, but then there were stories that women shared about, like men that came on to them at one conference and they decided to be intimate with, and then they find out later they have a girlfriend of 3 years and they lied about it. Yeah. Or people who are just like not being respectful, or people who like want something from them in exchange for funding. And the stories that these women told of being like sexually harassed and not respected, and not even like getting to the point of like mutualism or value, like just outright being used because they didn't know something, and, there's no bad decisions that I think any of these women made in their choices. And I would never shame someone for their choices, but it's this environment of takerism. Where they're like, you're like one woman in a sea of 100 men, and you don't ever see anything but white boys on Zoom, mostly white boys on Zoom, all day, every day, constantly. And so I am taking a position moving forward that if there's not a woman on your board, I'm not sure I want to work with you. Yeah. If there's not a woman in your C class, I think you need to take a cold, hard look in the mirror. I think that if you're not actively striving to make your teams, even in software development, half women, and there are women engineers, they are not unicorns. They exist. That not doing something is choosing to be part of the problem.
Of course.
Yeah. And so the work I will personally be doing moving forward has a lot to do with coming to terms with how far we have yet to go. And, so in the Cosmos ecosystem, we're going to be doing an audit of core teams and validator teams to find out where are the women and how many women are there and what roles do they have, and publishing a report. And we are going to be circulating a commitment to empowering women to all of these same teams and asking them to step up. And, I'd love to have it go beyond just Cosmos and just kind of keep the commitment going and keep the data set going. Because I think when you have data, you can have a non-emotional conversation. Sure. It's not like where the ladies at. It's like the data says we have a gap.
A huge gap.
Yeah. Huge gap. And we need to come up with strategies around that. And, I have some hope in it. At the Nebular Summit, I'm not sure why I did this, but it was a thing that came to me walking down the road. I went to a flower shop and I bought something like 50 pink flowers. I gave one to every woman I saw for a half hour until I ran out of them. And then I went to the Cosmos Ladies event. And when you hand this woman a flower and you're like, we just want to honor all the women today. The look on these women's faces was like they'd never been seen by anyone. I mean, it was the first time anyone had actually thanked them for putting up with fucking everything and all the guys and all their problems and all their needs. And I was like, it's like no one had ever seen them before. And then I got to the actual like women's gathering event and I was like, oh my God, there's another like 40 women in this room. And I ran out of flowers.
Haven't been seen. Yeah.
And I did the math and I was like, there's got to be 80 or 90 women in this room or like in this building. And you look around the room and you don't even see them.
Yeah.
They've been taught to be small and to like disappear into the background to the point where you scan a room and like you don't even notice them. And that really scares me.
Yeah.
You know, and I've experienced pushback of people being like, you're too direct. I'm like, I was raised in Germany. You think I'm direct? Should have met my father.
Let me give you a contrast.
Yeah. Like, and you know, it's a thing where it's a lot of women being told they're too much or they're only allowed to do BD or they're only the ops girl or they're just the marketing maven. They're not a product strategist. They're not a budding engineer. They're not a future CEO. And so, I mean, I think every VC on the planet needs to just like pause and make their next 10 investments women-led, women-boarded, women CEO and develop bigger standards for the industry because it's not that all the guys are bad, but the entrenched bias is shocking and has to evolve. And it is not, in my opinion, what the future of humanity can be. And it's not actually completely safe for women in this industry. And no. I went to Consensus alone and I went to ECC alone and certainly was never like without allies and friends anywhere I went. But, you know, I was the only one from the actual Regen Network team that went. And the way in which people try to take advantage of a woman alone in the industry is scary and unsafe for lots of people. And it's not just sort of the things I've witnessed. It's like you get these women in a room and you start to hear their stories and your just blood pressure rises and your toes curl and you're just like, this is the grossest thing I've ever heard in my life. And I can't stand for it anymore. And I think it's a requirement of us that we speak up and that it's not just the women speaking up. And I think it's a requirement that we have a new level of accountability moving forward.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I hold that with the a queasiness in my stomach and a desire also to just recognize the courage it takes to speak and to share your own lived experience alongside others and to draw attention to what is really very painful and oftentimes traumatic. You know, you're swimming upstream in so many ways, building these incredibly hard to build systems in an extractive economy that just wants to forget about ecology. And to stand in a room as a woman amidst so much toxicity, frankly, you know, takes even more strength. And yet at the same time, I think there's this kernel of hope that I hear in all of the men listening, recognizing this moment and this truth in our industry that, you know, we really cannot regenerate the earth if we don't understand women and their role as leaders for the future that we have to build together. And I think this is just really a microcosm of our own disconnection from reality and also from ourselves, really recognizing, you know, we each possess this unique mixture of feminine and masculine energy. And our society has really perpetuated this heavy dominance on masculine expressions in a business or a tech or a finance environment. Yeah. And there's one manifestation of this, which is how many women are on stage. But there's also so many others in terms of how you described of, you know, hey, let's hook up and I'll give you some sort of, you know, grant or this or that. You know, these are all just symptoms of a really deeper underlying dis-ease around what it means to be human.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, my hope is that having these open conversations and really inviting people to very specific things like, hey, in ReFi, we can't have manels. We can't have a stage full of men. This isn't regenerative. And to just speak up, if you're a dude on a panel speaking or you're invited to speak, you have to look around and see who's around you. And give up your own seat if you need to. I've done this before, coming up to a panel and saying that I was a guy, and I looked to the girl and I was like, yo, you're a badass ReFi leader. Like, here's the mic, just go.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to do this. And really, it's not about, for me, the quota itself, but the recognition that we need a diversely, a radically different system in order to bring together the land stewards on the ground, the communities, the earth, Mother Nature herself with these financial systems. Because otherwise, if it's continuing to be led by men, we're going to make the same mistakes of the past. And so I really, honor you and appreciate speaking in this way. And if there's any other, women listening who have stories to tell or have something to say, like, I hope it's clear that ReFi is a community that's yearning to improve and to grow and to look at the hard, cold facts of where we are and where we need to go. And so I don't know if there's anything else that you want to unpack there. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground, but just wanted to honor and reflect, the truth and the pain in what you've said.
I mean, I want to give a shout out and then maybe try to ground it in community. I took stage twice this year, including the consensus stage, which was probably the biggest stage we were given. And I did Nebula in Paris too. But that happened largely because Gregory stepped back. Yeah. And I think it takes, God bless his mustache. I love that man. Long may it rain.
He loves to.
But it's about, people taking responsibility and, recognizing
aware.
There's a lot of different things going on in the ecosystem at one time and, realizing that, no one knows they're ready until they step on stage and crush it, no matter who you are.
Exactly.
And that's very vulnerable.
Yes.
But from a design perspective, at like a true pattern level, whether it's climate and ReFi, or it's public goods and I'm totally a public goods maxi, or it's the Cosmos ecosystem or Ethereum or blockchain at large, we're not just building software here.
No.
We're building a new world, which means we're building community, which means we're both independent and interdependent. And we have a responsibility to really think at a design and architectural level and the way we design products, the way we think of our users, to reflect on our biases, to think of who we hire, think of the culture that we're setting. Because, my current motto is culture is queen until proven otherwise, and every woman is president of something, maybe not yet declared. But I think what community we're building and the values that we carry is actually the most important thing to design into. And there's no infrastructure or application layer solution that is going to get away from having to design into that. And if you don't design into that, you're going to just be another DeFi extraction mechanism, and maybe you're the financial infrastructure of the future that we'll all use, but probably not. Probably not. Like from an investment standpoint, probably not. And over my career, the projects I've worked on that have had women on the board and women in leadership have behaved more responsibly, have done more with the funding they've been given. They've been really positive places for everyone involved to work at. And I think that we can be stronger when we really think about designing into community. Because to me, I'm a community first person. Like I wouldn't do all of this if I wasn't trying to empower humans to empower themselves. And I really feel like, the next bull run is filled with women and other weirdos and a lot of artistic chaos and is stepping away from infrastructure layers. The last bull run was an infrastructure bull run, and we need application, we need users, we need community, we need art, we need expression,
Yes,
we need all of this other side of the brain experience, and we need creative chaos in order to punctuate against the hard underlying infrastructure, and which underlying infrastructure requires a high level of engineering skill, which makes it a bro dominant place. And just reflecting on how we're whole cultures, whole people, whole teams, and whole movements, I think is really going to make us the most powerful community we can be. And to me, blockchain is not just a conversation about software. I actually don't think that crypto is a thing. I think it's blockchain.
Sure.
I'm a blockchain maxi. I think crypto is a marketing term that makes no sense for anything but Bitcoin. But I actually think that blockchain is the cultural wave of the future. I think that what we built here is going to be the foundations of a new world. I think it can only happen here. Actually, I don't think it can happen in Web 2. I think Web 2 inches along and wants to be something that it's not. And it's very 2004, just to date it, literally. But I think that if we're building the new world, we actually have to design into that and take responsibility for that.
Mm-hmm. And this is the only shot we've got.
Yeah.
It
I mean,
really
we're this planet, we as a species may go down.
Hmm.
The planet will continue to function in some fashion with or without us, but we're not just regenerating landscapes. We're regenerating the human experience. We're regenerating ourselves. We're regenerating what it fundamentally means to be human. And our North Star is not just ecological or technological. It has to be deeply human, or it's absolutely irrelevant to our cultural evolution and the evolution of our spirits and our species. And I'm not willing to do anything that doesn't dig down into the heart of that anymore. And it isn't willing to be raw and open about the messiness of it all. And I've had some experiences this summer that were just some of the most pandemonium chaos I've ever witnessed humans create. And I won't call out the experiences by name and embarrass them for their central misplanning department challenges of group experiences. Yeah, but I've seen people literally thrive through chaos and in like a couple of days of like absolute madness, somehow start forming community. In this very decentralized way, like sort of like a bunch of sub-DAOs formed naturally. A bunch of people started to sort of co-create naturally. A bunch of people started to set culture naturally.
So good.
All the homies found each other. And by the end of, these chaotic experiences I had, I felt like we had formed a real community. And I was like, wow, we can totally mess up everything. Like literally everything that could have been messed up was messed up in this situation. And everyone was like, what's going on with this situation? But we self-organized.
Yeah.
We the people.
We found a way.
And I fundamentally, I was like, wow, if there was ever a test of, centralization versus decentralization live, that was it.
This was it.
That was it. And I haven't been in something like chaotic since Occupy. And I was like, damn, this is something out here. But then people self-organized and they subbed out and they created culture and they leaned in together. And by the end of it, you had a real community and you had a family unit that had found its way back to its heart. And so I do fundamentally believe, and this is again why I'm pro permissionless credit class and CosmWasm app chaos, is that I actually think when you leave people to their own devices, they inherently come back to their hearts and they're just all yearning to come back to their hearts. And everybody across the industry has taken on more than they can handle.
Yeah.
And the best thing we can do next is just lean into the chaos, trust the chaos, trust each other, and know that we're fundamentally a community. Because when you go to these things like ECC and all the people from all the projects across the world, I mean, there are these moments of incredible global community that you can't have unless you're there in person, and that really give you the strength and hope to go back and do the work that you really believe in. And I think we need these cultural touch points, and we just need to carry more consciousness and more inclusivity into it and be super intentional about what we're doing. There's no such thing as bad timing. There's no such thing as not now. There's no such thing as like, oops, sorry, I didn't think about that. Like we have to start taking greater responsibility for ourselves, and because it's taking care of each other. Yeah. And that's where, I'm just not capable of operating in spaces where there isn't really mutual care for each other. And, I'm going to be making changes in the work that I do to make sure that that future is paved.
Totally.
And
like
that everybody is empowered in that process.
Oh, I love it. Well, I think this is a really beautiful framing to wrap up our conversation today.
Yeah.
I love how you kind of lay out this metaphor of these, cultures that are emerging from this technological revolution, laying the foundation for this new earth.
Yeah.
And that as we lean into the values of decentralization, of collaboration, of communities of care, we're actually, like you said, rediscovering what it means to be human. And it feels like there's a kind of old story of self that is rooted in our separateness, that is slowly fading away as we experiment with these different systems that rely on one another through network effects to thrive.
Yeah.
And actually in doing so, we're both, more individual, more unique, and yet more interconnected and more part of a whole than we ever could have imagined. And I love this, transition that blockchain and also artificial intelligence is inviting us around really looking deeply in the mirror about what it means to be human and seeing that actually yes, time is running out, but all the tools and all the people and all the capital is here. And it's not only time to build, but time to belong. So thank you so much for sharing, all of you, with us today. For those listening who want to get in touch, want to get involved in what you're doing, what's one thing that they can do to get involved?
Yeah, I think if you want to get involved with climate, I mean, maybe look at the hashtag ReFi on Twitter. It's a good place to start. ReFi DAO, Regen Network. We're all very welcoming ecosystems. So whatever ecosystem you're in, you should lean in where you're at. Go local on the blockchain before we go Interchain.
Nice.
And if you want to reach out to me, I'm easiest to find on Twitter. I'm Erda_Kette, which is German for Earth Chain.
Okay.
For the record, for the Germans.
I had no idea. I was always like, no, what's this girl?
I never had a Twitter before this job, but it was required at some point.
E-R-D-E-K-E-T-T-E.
Amazing. Yeah, ERDE_Kette, K-E-T-T-E.
Okay. Amazing.
And then my portfolio is at artecologydesign.com, which is where I keep the body of my work. And it is my great hope that if there are women out there that want to get involved with other women's organizations, come find me. If you want to get involved with the Cosmos Ladies Cartel, all you got to do is be added to a Telegram group. Not challenging.
Easy.
To get into the conversation. And I really look forward to how we can all build a global community through our technological interventions. And yeah, I just want to thank you for holding space today.
Thanks.
We became friends at the beginning of my journey. We've been sort of internet friends for a long time, and now we're human friends.
So good.
And you have this lovely dinner with other people in the community here in Lisbon.
Many more to come.
Yeah,
Amazing.
it feels like many moons ago, but it feels like such an extraordinary privilege to come full circle. And this experience here really offers that capstone on this very unique time period in the world and in my life and in my professional and personal journey. So thank you for being you and holding space.
Thanks. Yeah, it's an honor. And if you ever come out with a personal token, I'm bullish on SBAX.
Sarah
Bullish on Regen, bullish on Sarah, all the work that you guys are doing. Thanks so much. And I really appreciate having you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.